And if that player does exist, if we're talking about the perfect player, if we're going 2K and we're putting that player together, Derek,
player.
What does that creative player look like for the Philadelphia 76ers?
Well, there was naturally only one name that came to mind when he brought up this topic. Nick Stauskas. Because he's big like Clay and shoots like Steph.
Exactly.
That was like maybe the last name on earth I was expecting.
I only brought up the name
exactly
to reference Vivek. Like he said, when they if you missed it, when they drafted him, they did a special on it, and he said, "For me, Stauskas, big like Clay, shoot like Steph." But theoretically, if you were looking for a pairing next to Embiid like Maxey, you'd want someone who was big like Clay and shoots like Steph, but who was actually like that. Not just somebody who was misidentified as that. And I think that's where it starts. It has to be a high-volume shooter, like a very high-volume shooter, who's comfortable off the catch, comfortable off the move, and has the size to defend next to Tyrese Maxey. I think that's sort of like the starting point. Now, there's obviously going to be a whole bunch of other skill sets that you would like to have along with that, but that is where I would start.
Sauce Castillo, you're unbelievable. First I come back and Eugene Ross has a new profile picture in the chat, which is throwing me off. Then Derek is hitting me over the head with Nick Stauskas jokes to open the show. So
Nick Stauskas, who by the way is around in the Wells Fargo Center a lot lately.
Yeah, he's been involved with something with Sixers.com or with the team in general. So I don't know if we'll see him popping up more and more. Well, I guess we'll find out. So I will go in a different direction in terms of the caliber of player that I'm going to refer to. If you start with a base level of, not quite James Harden, right? James Harden would be a high level third person to put in there. But a guy basically his size, big shooting guard type, who can play make, who can knock down threes, but be a much more willing catch and shoot player than James Harden has been throughout his career. And someone who's willing to defend a hell of a lot more than James Harden is. Essentially, you want, if Paul George was a better off the dribble creator and playmaker, it would be kind of close to Paul George.
We're talking about 27-year-old Paul George.
Yeah, he fits he checks a lot of the boxes. He, at his peak, was a guy who could defend basically anybody. I'd say 2 through 4. I don't think he was great against ones, although he's capable of it. And I wouldn't want him defending true bigs. But I do think he could defend basically any wing in the league, any 2 guard and up to basically power forward size players, and do it well. And on top of that, he was a smart, timely, off-ball defender, guy who could kill you in the passing lanes, get out, create turnovers, get you out in transition, but do that without having to gamble too much, which is a big deal, right? Like a lot of the guys that we think of as, that guy creates a lot of steals, they're selling out and they're exposed to back cuts and things in the other direction. So the defensive versatility there, the ability to be a high volume catch and shoot player is really important. I think it's most important next to Joel Embiid, but certainly I think you can see, maybe not with Tyrese specifically, but if you looked at Buddy Hield and his success in Indiana playing off of Halliburton, I would like to see a guy who can be in a partnership with Tyrese as a screener, so is big enough to free Tyrese on the perimeter, but then is like a good enough, credible enough threat that if somebody sells out on Maxey, that's just a quick after the ghost screen over the
JJ
second
Redick
guy.
12 plays,
That I think is a big thing that I value. And then I know we've been hammering this quite a bit recently. Playmaking is just so critical to what they need from the rest of the roster, because Joel is not the highest level playmaker in the middle of the floor, although he has gotten better. Tyrese has gotten better, but he's not who anybody views as like a traditional point guard in terms of the playmaking responsibilities. Still waiting for him to turn the wrap passes, the skip passes over the top into more of a regular thing. We've seen the flashes. Now they have to become close to the top of your priority list. Without that, you need someone in the backcourt next to him or on the wing. I'm looking at a 2-3 mostly, but don't really care about positional labels in that sense. But somebody who you put the ball in their hands, whether that's as the primary initiator or as the guy attacking in a 4-on-3 because Joel or Maxey got doubled, can read the defense well enough to either get to their spot, hit a pull-up jumper, get to the rim, or find the advantage on the weak side, wherever the ball needs to go. So it's a long way of saying they need a max player who is like a true max player. It's not a guy who's a max in contract only that's got a lot of flaws.
Do you have anyone in mind when you say max in contract only?
I mean, there was a guy who was paid
You know a guy?
quite a bit of money. Tobias wasn't at the max though, right?
He was just
so
short,
max.
but it was
So-
like there was a distinction without a difference.
Yeah.
He was right there.
He was set 179, basically the max. Yeah.
So the functionally no different, but yeah, it's so a lot of that to say a guy who can play, make, defend, shoot.
Handle
dribble.
ball, yeah.
It's the prototypical wing that you talk about, the 27-year-old
Yes.
Paul George that we saw playing in Indiana against the Cleveland Cavaliers, where he burst onto the scene and everybody was just like, oh, okay. And that was that guy. And when you look at those, let's say the shooting guards that we all would talk about when we really would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the past, you would have those certain players where Joe Dumars was 6'3", and he was a smaller guy. And you look at him and say, all right, he's a smaller guy, but he's playing next to another elite guy like Isaiah Thomas in the backcourt. They had a bigger lineup, so that worked. Mitch Richmond was the prototypical 6'5", right there, stocky shooting guard. Then you go to some others that you can just run off, J.R. Ryder, shooting guard. And all these names that we can just simply go through naming all of these shooting guards that they have. And then you go to the small forward position where you start to look at 6'7", 6'8", a little bit, maybe 6'9".
Which is more where the league has gone now.
And
it's
that's
a lot
where-
more prioritizing
exactly.
those types of guys.
Yeah, so with the prototypical 2 to 3 type of player, which we just now categorize as a wing, that can shoot the basketball, can defend, can put the ball on the floor. As much as we talk about shot creation from Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey on the pass, Joel Embiid will shot create for himself because he's that good. He can do that. The same thing for Tyrese Maxey. The third one is the same. It doesn't have to be elite, but it has to be good enough where you know that they can get to their spot, get their shot off against a tough defense and still hit maybe a tough shot, but also make it advantageous for themselves and maybe their teammates where you can also find some really good looks for them as well. So those are the attributes that we really look at that many of these guys possess. But as we talked about, a lot of these players that we talk about are imperfect because we can pick at so many different things from Paul George to Jimmy Butler to Brandon Ingram to even Alex Caruso. As much as we like, there are things that we can all pick apart. And if we had the ideal 2K put together this type of creative player that Kyle mentioned at the very top, it's that guy somewhere between 6'5" to 6'8" that can do a number of things on the floor that makes life easier for both Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid on both sides of the floor. And the one thing that this player may be able to do, not so much when we talk about Brandon Ingram, but when we were discussing Jimmy Butler and Paul George at the very beginning of the offseason, it really means that you're going to elevate yourself to the top of the defensive side with Joel Embiid because that's not Maxey's strong suit as of right now. As much as he has improved, you still need somebody that can come in and play much better in that role defensively to take some of that pressure off of Tyrese Maxey, where it might shine a little bit brighter and we can highlight some of his defensive things that we're seeing positively from him because of who he's out there on the floor with that length, with that size right there for them at that wing position. So that prototypical wing that if the lineup is big enough where you're talking 6'6", all the way from 2 to 4, where you're taking away Embiid and Maxey because we already know what they are, you're really looking at something that might be pretty good as much as we talk about the length and the size of the players around those two. So if that player can possess those things that we just laid out, there'll be some really good conversations of who that player might be.
We all silly like the mayor.